I moved into my new apartment about a week ago. I thought it would be a good place to work as a software developer and heal after my breakup. The apartment was in an old building, a former textile factory. It had a certain character, but it felt neglected, like the walls were holding on to secrets. On my second night, I tried to sleep. That's when I first heard it, the tapping against my window. I convinced myself it was just a branch, maybe the wind, but the tapping didn't stop. It was rhythmic and relentless. My heart raced as I lay there, staring at the ceiling. I told myself to ignore it, but it felt wrong. As the week went on, things became stranger. I'd leave in the morning and find things out of place when I returned. My keys would be on the table instead of the counter. My coffee cup was moved too. I tried to brush it off, thinking I was just forgetting things. It was a new place and I was distracted. Then the shadows began to appear. Out of the corner of my eye, I'd see something move. I'd turn quickly, but nothing was there, just the peeling paint and the old floorboards creaking. I started to feel jumpy, like someone was watching me, waiting for something. One night I heard them, muffled voices coming from the empty apartment above me. It was strange because I didn't think anyone lived there. The whispers felt urgent, close. I pressed my ear against the ceiling but couldn't make out any words. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or not. It felt like my mind was spiraling. The longer I stayed in that apartment, the weirder things got. I felt like I was losing my grip. One night, I stood by the window, and the whispers seemed to grow clearer. But still, I couldn't understand them. A cold shiver ran through me. I felt very alone. I finally gathered the courage to knock on the door of the apartment above. I waited there, my heart racing. I knocked again, but nobody answered. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a faint voice say my name. It sent chills down my spine. I spun around, but there was nobody there. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I stared at the closed door, confused and terrified. I returned to my apartment, feeling more on edge than ever. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know where to go. How could I escape the feeling of being watched? On the next few nights, I barely slept. The tapping returned, more insistent, and the voices started again. They were getting louder, as if they were trying to communicate with me. I didn't want to stay, but I didn't know if I was brave enough to leave. Now, as I sit here telling you this over coffee, I can't shake the uneasiness. What was in that empty apartment above me? Why did it sound like I wasn't the only one living here? I still can't explain it, and I don't think I'll ever forget what happened. The next day, I decided to confront my fears. I needed answers. I grabbed my laptop and walked to the coffee shop down the street. I hoped the bustling atmosphere would distract me, even if just for a little while. As I reviewed code and sipped my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to investigate the apartment above me. What if someone really was living there? Maybe they could help explain the strange noises. My heartbeat quickened at the thought. What if I knocked and discovered something horrifying? After a few hours, I left the coffee shop. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. I returned to my apartment, anxiety creeping back in. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and approached the door of the empty apartment above. I knocked firmly. Nothing. I tried again, louder this time, but the silence felt heavy. Just as I turned to leave, I thought I heard something. A scraping sound, like furniture being dragged across the floor. Instinctively, I froze. My heart raced. Was it my mind playing tricks again? I listened intently, straining to catch any more sounds. And then, to my disbelief, the whispering returned. Just above me, faint, yet unmistakable. It was different this time, more insistent, almost pleading. I pressed my ear to the door, desperate to make sense of it. Then I heard it clearly. "Help me." I stumbled back, the fear washing over me in waves. I darted back to my apartment, locking the door behind me. I sank down on the couch, trying to catch my breath. Why would anyone need my help? The whispers tormented my thoughts. There was no way I could ignore this. Determined, I reached for my phone and searched for any information on the building. It turned out that years ago, there had been an incident. A fire in the textile factory that had claimed lives. There were rumors of spirits haunting the place ever since. My stomach dropped. Had I unknowingly stepped into something beyond my understanding? That night, the tapping at my window started earlier than before. I huddled under my blanket, too scared to check. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, the shadows danced menacingly. I remembered the whisper, and it stirred a mix of sympathy and dread within me. I needed to know who was in that apartment, or what. With trembling hands, I grabbed my flashlight and approached the window. Just as I reached the curtain, the tapping stopped. Silence blanketed the room. Just as I exhaled in relief, I heard the voice again, clearer now. "Let me in." Panic surged through me. I stepped back, my mind racing. Someone, or something, was trying to reach me. I hesitated, fear battling curiosity. Who was that voice? What did they want? I wanted to close my eyes, pretend none of it was happening, but I couldn't shake the thought of leaving it unanswered. As I gathered my courage, I resolved to confront whatever was in that apartment above me. I needed one last attempt to uncover the truth. What awaited me, I could only imagine. I spent the next day trying to focus on anything else. Work was slow, and my mind kept wandering back to the apartment above. I could hardly concentrate. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a whisper, pulling me back to that door. By evening, I could no longer fend off my curiosity. Armed with my flashlight and a spirit of determination, I stood once more before the door. This time, I took a deep breath and knocked again, my heart pounding against my ribs. Still nothing. Just as I turned to walk away, I heard it again, that scraping sound, like furniture being pushed. My hands were clammy, but I couldn't back down now. I gripped the doorknob, hesitating. In that moment, I made a choice. Twisting the knob, I found the door unlocked. My breath hitched. Was someone waiting for me? A wave of dread washed over me, but I stepped inside, illuminating the space with my flashlight. Dust motes danced in the narrow beam. The apartment was empty, or so it seemed. The rooms were bare, save for a few pieces of old furniture covered with white sheets. I shone my light across what looked like a small dining table in the corner. The chairs were aligned perfectly, almost too perfectly. That made my skin crawl. I moved deeper into the apartment. The air was stale and cold. As I swept my flashlight over the walls, I noticed something strange. Faint, charred marks lined the edges, resembling claw marks. Panic gripped me as I thought about the fire. Were those burn marks, or something more? Then I froze. In the stillness, I heard it again. "Help me." But this time it sounded different. The voice was layered, distorted, as if the pleas were echoing through time. I could feel it in my bones. I moved toward the sound, drawn in but terrified. Suddenly the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath puffing in front of me, and I instinctively took a step back. That's when my flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced wildly. I tried to steady my breathing, but it became hard to focus. In a panic, I flipped the switch on the flashlight multiple times, but it only flickered more violently. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind me. I turned, nearly tripping over my own feet. I rattled the doorknob, but it felt like it was stuck, as if someone was holding the other side. My heart raced. I was trapped. I pounded on the door, shouting for help. Then everything went dark. The flashlight went out fully, plunging me into a pitch-black void. I pressed my back against the door, listening, my pulse echoing in my ears. That's when I heard it again, clearer than ever. "I'm here." A chill ran down my spine as I turned to face the darkness. I could feel someone, something, right in front of me. I was no longer just hearing whispers. I felt a presence. The air grew heavier, charged with energy that made my skin crawl. And in that moment of intense fear, I realized something crucial. I wasn't alone. Then, a cold hand grasped my shoulder. I gasped, instinctively spinning around to face whatever had touched me. My heart pounded now, each beat loud in the oppressive silence. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I squinted, hoping to make out the shape of whatever stood before me. But there was nothing, just the unnerving absence of light and the echo of my own breath. "Who's there?" I called out, the tremor in my voice betraying my fear. I knew I should have turned back, should have left the apartment while I still could, but something held me captive in that suffocating void. Then the voice came again, closer this time, almost a whisper. It was soft yet filled with an urgency that chilled my spine. "Help me!" I felt a cold breeze swirl around me, sending shivers down my arms. It caressed my skin and raised the hair on the back of my neck. Suddenly the air grew oppressive, as if a storm were brewing in this small space, and I instinctively took a step back, bumping into the door behind me. "Please, I can't see you," I stammered, half pleading, half terrified. "What do you want?" But the voice only echoed again. "Help." With a deep breath, I focused my mind. Maybe I could reason with whatever I was facing. "If you need help, show me." I felt ridiculous for speaking into the darkness, but I was out of options. The shadows thickened, swirling like a mist around my feet. That's when I noticed a faint glow in front of me. It was so dim I almost missed it, but the flickering light pulsed like a heartbeat. I took a cautious step towards it, the cold air nipping at my face. With each step, the glow grew brighter, revealing the outlines of furniture I had previously missed in the dark. The ghostly figures of the chairs and the dining table that seemed to loom around me. Then the light shifted, illuminating a picture frame propped against the wall. I couldn't see the picture clearly. It was shadowed by the dim light, but I felt drawn to it. The distorted voice urged me closer, a mix of desperation and anger resonating between the flickers of light. Suddenly the glow intensified, blinding me for a moment, and I squinted against it. When my eyes adjusted, I could see the image in the frame. My blood ran cold. It was a family portrait, well-dressed and looking happy. But even in the dim light, I recognized the faces of the people. Each one had been marked with those same claw-like burns I had seen on the walls earlier. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, the temperature in the room dropped even further. I felt a rush of panic as the light flickered violently, and in that moment, everything went silent. My pulse quickened as I realized I wasn't just seeing the echoes of someone's past. I was peering into something far darker. Then, the door handle rattled behind me, sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. It wasn't just stuck. Someone was trying to open it from the other side. My breath hitched in my throat as the voice turned frantic. "Help me! They're coming!" With my heart racing and every instinct screaming at me to run, I stood frozen, caught between the tangible world outside and the chilling presence within. Whatever was trying to get in was just as real as the voice begging for help. And now I was trapped in both fear and uncertainty. I needed to decide, stay or find a way out before whatever was behind that door made its entrance. The door rattled again, more violently this time, and I stumbled backwards. My breath caught in my chest as I glanced once more at the flickering light. I could feel the desperation radiating from the trapped voice, wrapping around my throat like a noose. It wasn't just a plea for help. It felt more like a warning, a sign of imminent danger threatening to break through. My instincts kicked in, and I turned to the darkened room behind me. "I have to find another way out," I whispered to myself, but I wasn't sure where to go. Every flicker of light seemed like a heartbeat, pulsing and growing more erratic. As I surveyed the room, I spotted a window in the far corner, barely discernible in the shadows. The old wooden frame looked solid, but it might be my only way out. I took one last look at the door, still shaking under the weight of whoever was on the other side, then rushed toward the window. My fingers slid along the dusty sill, thick with grime. I fumbled with the latch, my heart hammering as I tried to flick it open. It was stuck. Panic flashed through me. What if I couldn't get it open? What if I ran out of time? Behind me, the voice turned frantic. "Hurry! You need to—" I shook my head, feeling a rush of frustration. "I can't," I shouted back. "Just hold on." With renewed determination, I wrestled with the latch, pulling and twisting, until I finally heard a faint click. The hinges groaned as I pushed the window up, a rush of cold air spilling inside. Just as I was about to climb through, I glanced back. The door splintered under the strain of whatever was trying to get in. I could see just a sliver of movement in the dim light, something dark and shapeless pressing against the wood. It was almost human, but so warped and wrong. With a surge of adrenaline, I scrambled higher, pushing myself through the window. My legs hung outside, but the moment was interrupted by another loud thud against the door. I jerked back, nearly losing my balance. I could feel my heart racing as I scanned the ground below, searching for anything I could land on. Then I saw it. A garden below, overgrown but soft enough to break my fall. I can do this, I breathed. There was no turning back now. I released my grip and fell into the chaos of weeds and debris. I landed awkwardly. Pain shot up my legs, but there was no time to register it. I pushed myself up and glanced back at the window. The shadow loomed larger within the room. It was coming closer. I turned and ran toward the gate leading out to the street, fueled by fear. As I burst through the gate, I paused to look back at the apartment. The windows were dark now, but I felt an urge to rush back and search for the voice. What had happened to it? Was there really someone trapped inside? But before I could act on that impulse, a chilling realization hit me. The moment I had stepped out of the building, that darkness lingered behind, waiting for me. I could still hear the voice, echoing in my head, mixing with the steady beat of my racing heart. Just then, I heard a low growl not far behind me. My stomach dropped. Someone or something was in pursuit. It was far from over. As I turned to run, I could only hope I wasn't too late to escape whatever had been haunting that apartment. I didn't know then what awaited me in the dark. I only knew I had to survive. I sprinted down the narrow street, my breath coming in uneven gasps. The night air was cold against my skin, but it wasn't the chill that made me shiver. It was the sound behind me. The growl, low and rumbling, echoing in the quiet. It felt impossibly close. I couldn't look back. I had to keep moving. As I darted around a corner, the adrenaline surged through me like fire. I needed light, a safe place. A few houses down, I spotted a soft glow spilling from a front porch. Someone had left their porch light on. I dashed toward it, hoping for safety. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but fear sealed my mouth shut. When I reached the porch, I froze. A figure stood outside the front door, silhouetted against the warm light inside. It was a man, tall and broad, and he was staring directly at me. Panic set in. Was he friend or foe? Just as I debated my next move, the growl rose again, sharper this time. I didn't have a choice. I took a step forward, raising my hands to show I meant no harm. "Please, can you help me?" I said, my voice shaky. The man's gaze shifted, his eyes flickering toward the darkness behind me. "What's going on?" he asked, genuine concern breaking through his confusion. I swallowed hard. "Something is chasing me. I think it came from that building." I pointed back toward the apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. Before he could respond, the growl grew louder, and I felt the ground tremor slightly beneath my feet. I could see shadowy shapes darting just beyond the glow of the porch light, and desperation clawed at my throat. "Please, let me inside." He hesitated, eyes narrowing as he weighed my frantic expression. Finally, he stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Get in!" I didn't need to be told twice. I stepped inside, nearly tripping over the threshold as I rushed past him. The scent of wood polish and something sweet filled the air. I turned back to see him swiftly closing the door, locking it with a solid click. "Now, what's really happening?" he asked, studying me with an intensity that made me uneasy. I had to tell him everything, but the words seemed to stumble over themselves. "I heard a voice. There was something in that apartment. It sounded like someone was trapped," I managed to say, running a shaking hand through my hair. The man watched me carefully. "You shouldn't have been in there. That place has a reputation." "What do you mean?" My throat felt tight. "Tell me." He hesitated, his face shadowed in thought. "People have gone missing after spending time inside that building. At night, it calls to those who walk past. The owners. No one has ever explained it." A fresh wave of fear washed over me. "What do you mean it calls? What kind of calls?" But before he could answer, the low growl erupted again, now louder and closer. The walls seemed to vibrate, and the lights flickered. "Is it in here?" I gasped, looking around wildly. Then everything went dark. The darkness swallowed me whole. I blinked, my eyes scrambling to adjust, but there was nothing but shadows. I held my breath, straining to listen, heart hammering against my ribs. The growl had stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. "Are you okay?" The man's voice sliced through the darkness, sounding distant. "Stay close." I felt a rush of panic. "I can't see," I shouted. "What's happening?" The warmth from the porch light seemed like a forgotten memory. I reached out, groping for something, anything to ground myself. My fingers brushed against a wall, cool and solid. I moved along it, inching away from the door. Suddenly, a noise echoed. Soft, almost like a whisper, but I couldn't make out the words. My pulse quickened again. "Did you hear that?" I said, voice barely above a whisper. "No," he replied, stepping toward me. I could hear the shuffle of his feet on the wooden floor. "But I think something is out there." Before I could respond, the lights blinked back on, illuminating the room and revealing the man's worried expression. I didn't feel entirely reassured. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with a sense of dread. "What is that noise?" I asked again, a knot tightening in my stomach. The growl returned, not behind me but somewhere deeper in the house. My blood ran cold. "Stay here," he ordered, already stepping back toward the door. Panic rose in my throat. "What are you doing?" "I have to check it out." He hesitated, giving me a stern look. "I'll be right back." "Don't!" I grabbed his arm, afraid to let him go. "We need to get out of here." But he shrugged me off and continued moving. I bit my lip, my mind racing. I knew I should have been looking for a way out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. As he reached for the door, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A shadow shifted just outside the window, dark and quick. I turned to look, and that was when I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness, impossibly bright and unblinking. "Get back!" I screamed, heart racing, my instincts screaming at me to run. He turned, bewildered. "What did you see?" But before I could answer, the eyes vanished. I felt cold fear wash over me and clenched my fists. I think we need to leave now." "Wait." He was about to argue, but a loud crash from the other side of the house silenced him. The sound shook the walls and rattled my bones. "Please," I begged, backing toward the front door. "Let's get out." He paused, torn between something he couldn't explain and the urgency of my plea. Just then, I heard that voice again, whispering, almost melodic, drifting through the air. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear it was calling for him, pulling him in. I could see his expression change, confusion flickering for a moment. "Don't listen," I urged, stepping toward him. "It's not safe." But the moment I stepped forward, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness once more. This time, the growl echoed from right outside, deep and menacing. I held my breath, knowing the next moments would determine everything. Would we make it out alive, or would that darkness claim us too? Just then, I heard a noise behind me, and my heart sank. Someone was in the house. I spun around, my heart racing. The sound was unmistakable, a shuffling, low and deliberate, creeping closer. It was coming from the hallway, just past the adjoining room. "Did you hear that?" I whispered harshly, eyes wide in terror. "Yeah," he replied, voice thin and strained. I could see him tense, his hands clenching into fists. "Maybe it's just a broken window or—" My voice faded, uncertainty creeping over me like frigid air. The growl filled my mind again, deep and threatening. I forced myself to focus. "We need to check it out together." Then it happened again, the whisper, soft and inviting. I turned back to the door, nearly looking through it, desperate to block out the sound. "Please," I urged, feeling frantic. "Let's go. Now. Just give me a minute." He was torn between fear and curiosity, and that couldn't end well. As he hesitated, shadows moved along the wall, darting closer. My breath caught as I caught sight of something behind him. A figure, just a silhouette at first. My blood turned to ice. "Look out!" I shouted and lunged forward, grabbing his arm. The lights buzzed back on, and my stomach dropped. There was nothing behind him, just empty space cloaked in darkness. Until the whisper returned, more insistent, echoing through the air, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. "Let's get out," I insisted, almost choking on the words. The urgency surged in my chest. "There's something in the house." "I don't see anything," he tossed back, but I could feel him wavering. In a sudden burst of adrenaline, he stepped forward, away from me, inching closer to where I had seen the shadow. I felt a chill pass through me. "No, don't." But it was too late. The growl erupted into a full roar, shaking the ground. He staggered, eyes wide with confusion, and I could see the determination in him falter. "Come on," I yelled, as I pulled him back toward the door, dragging him away from whatever was lurking just out of our sight. "We have to go." But the door wouldn't budge. I turned the handle frantically, feeling the panic rise. The door seemed to absorb my desperation, refusing to open. "Push," he said, jamming his shoulder into it. I took a breath and pressed against it too. With a loud creak, it finally swung open, spilling light into the dark hall. We stumbled out, eyes darting as we searched for any sign of movement. Then something caught my attention, a glimmer on the floor. I knelt down, my hand trembling as I reached for it. It was a small, old key, the metal cold under my fingers. "Look," I said, holding it up. "What is this?" Suddenly the whisper grew louder, now echoing all around us. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. "Turn back," it seemed to say, wrapping around me like a serpent. I dropped the key, heart racing as I glanced back at him. His face was pale, and I realized it wasn't just the fear. It was something deeper, something sinister that had latched itself onto him. "Run," I whispered, knowing we had to get out before the darkness consumed us completely. But just as we turned to leave, the whisper shifted into a roar, demanding our attention, pulling at us like a magnet. I felt the weight of it bearing down, and all at once, shadows converged around us, blocking our escape. The shadows twisted and writhed, an unsettling mass that seemed to breathe, shifting ever closer. My pulse raced, the instinct to flee warring with the fear that rooted me to the spot. I glanced at him. His face was a mask of confusion and dread, but his eyes were locked onto the darkness ahead, as if something had captivated him. "Zach!" I grabbed his arm and tugged, snapping him from whatever trance he had fallen under. "We need to move." He blinked, but the moment felt fragile, teetering on the brink of something enormous. "What if it's just shadows?" he whispered, his voice a mere thread. "Just shadows?" I shot back, my voice rising in urgency. "You saw what I saw. We have to go. Now." But even as I said it, an instinctual chill crawled up my spine. It was my fault we were here, my curiosity pulling us into this haunted house. I wanted to explore its secrets, but now, the secrets wanted us. A low growl formed in the shifting shadows again, deeper this time. It felt like it was echoing from inside me, resonating in my very bones. The air thickened, and I could almost taste the fear that hung around us. "Maybe we should," he started to say, but the murmur of voices surged forward, drowning out his words. They weren't just whispers. A cacophony of pleading, warning, and hunger beckoned to us. A clawing desperation grasped at our feet, urging us to step closer. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement just beyond the looming shadows. A figure shifted with an almost human quality, its outline distorted and flickering like an old television screen. I could barely register the dread pooling in my stomach before it lunged forward, a dark streak surging at us. "Run!" I screamed, pulling him through the doorway that led back to the kitchen. My heart thundered in my ears as we raced down the hall, the tiny window of light from the kitchen illuminating the swirling darkness behind us. The kitchen was chaotic. The old furniture cast strange shadows, but it felt like a refuge compared to the oppressive hallway. I slammed the door shut, pressing my back against it. "What just happened?" I panted, breathless. He sank to the ground, staring wide-eyed at the door as if expecting it to burst open. "I don't know. I thought I saw something, but—" His voice trailed off, overwhelmed. "Maybe it's not just shadows," I said, my thoughts racing. "Maybe it's something. something tied to this place. I shouldn't have come here, he said, shaking his head. We need to leave. But how? As if on cue, the door rattled, sending us both flinching back. The growl from the shadows now seemed to pulse, vibrating the very wood of the house. And that's when I remembered the key. I darted back to where I had dropped it, my hands scrambling across the cold floor until I picked it up again. This might be our only way out, I said, holding it up against the dim light. There must be a door we can unlock. Or something we shouldn't touch, he warned, but I could see the spark of curiosity ignite in his eyes. I had a feeling whatever this key unlocked, it was tied to whatever was menacing us. But could we risk it? The door continued to rattle, echoing the urgency of my thoughts. Before I could think twice, I took his hand and nodded toward the back door, praying that whatever awaited us was better than what lurked outside. But as we headed toward the basement door, the whispers turned into a deafening shout, clawing for our attention. And in that moment I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not just running from the shadows. We were hurtling toward something even darker. I gripped the key tightly in my palm, feeling its cold metal bite into my skin. The whispers swirled around us, a chaotic cacophony that grew louder as we approached the basement door. I glanced back at the kitchen door, half expecting it to burst open, revealing whatever horrors lay just beyond. The growling had shifted from a threatening undercurrent to a frantic urgency, and I knew we didn't have much time. Stay close, I whispered to Zach, knowing he was even more terrified than I was. There was a thin wall between us, fear and a desperate need to escape, but enthusiasm was quickly fading. The basement door looked old, the wood warped and cracked, like the very house itself was trying to keep us from moving forward. I could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing down, thick with dread and anticipation. The whispers were no longer pleading. They had morphed into a chorus of desperate cries. "Help me!" resonated through my thoughts, pulling me toward the door, but I pushed against it. We were not here to help. We needed to survive. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the rusty lock. It felt like a lifetime as I turned it slowly, praying it would unlock a way to safety rather than more darkness. A click echoed around the room, loud and sudden. The door swung open with a slow creak, revealing a set of narrow steps leading down into an abyss of shadow. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, knowing how hollow the question sounded. There was no turning back. Zach only nodded, fear tightening his features. Together, we descended the stairs, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. The air grew heavy and cold, and the whispers intensified, wrapping around us like a fog. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed, intertwining with shivers that raced down my spine. At the bottom, the space opened into a small, dimly lit room that smelled of decay and dampness. I shone my flashlight around, illuminating the walls that were caked with grime, revealing old, peeling paper that depicted family portraits, lives long forgotten. Then my eyes fell upon something against the far wall, and I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. It was a small table littered with items, a mirror, an old photograph, and what looked to be a diary. Against my better judgment, I stepped forward, the pull of curiosity stronger than the desire to flee. "Do you hear that?" Zach whispered, his eyes darting around nervously. I nodded, recognizing the faint murmur of something deeper. It wasn't just a voice, it was a feeling, a call that felt ancient and desperate. The diary seemed to resonate with it, like a link to the past. As I reached for it, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight. I stumbled back into Zach, panic surging through me. The room plunged into darkness again, broken only by the faint light from the window above. "Turn it on," Zach urged, his voice high-pitched. "I can't see. The light," I replied, my breath hitching. "Find the light," he shouted, a hint of urgency creeping in. With my heart racing, I felt my way back toward the table, desperate to find the diary, to see what truths it held. My fingers brushed the cold metal latch and I fumbled with it, finally pulling it open. I could barely see the words written within, but the shadows seemed to thrum with life as if they were urging me to read. "Please, just a little light," I whispered, feeling the world close in around me. Zach's hand slipped into mine, His touch grounded me amidst the engulfing darkness. Then I remembered the glow, the flicker of light that now felt like it was beckoning us. "Follow me," I commanded, pulling him towards where I'd left the keys. My fingers found the edges of the table, and I grabbed the diary before we turned toward the glow. In doing so, my flashlight flickered back to life, illuminating the room just as a strange shuffling sound echoed around us. The growl couldn't be far behind. "Now!" I shouted, pushing forward, shoving the diary into my backpack even as shadowy figures began to coalesce at the edges of our vision. We needed to reach the stairs before it was too late. With every step, the growls intensified, the darkness closing in, threatening to swallow us whole. As we fled back up the stairs, I dared to glance over my shoulder, and my stomach dropped. A figure emerged from the shadows, its shape twisting and shifting unnaturally. "I promised to help," it slithered, its voice echoing from the darkness, reverberating through the air like a haunting melody. We burst from the basement and slammed the door shut behind us, the sound echoing through the kitchen as we slammed against it, hearts racing together in a synchronized retreat. Staring at the door, I knew that whatever had followed us was not long behind. "Can we get out through the back?" Zach asked, breathless and desperate. "Maybe we'll have to find another way," I muttered, still shaken. We began scanning the kitchen for alternate exits, but the whispers returned, an unnerving serenade enticing us with promises of forgotten truths and peace, this time framed with a sinister undertone. "Don't listen," I warned, trying to drown out the eerie calls with sheer determination. But as we turned toward the back door, its ominous creaks echoed through the room. A warning, a harbinger of what was soon to come. And then it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Whatever was in this house, whatever I thought was just shadows, had suffered. They were trapped, tormented by their own histories. "Zach, we have to go," I snapped, urgency punctuating my words. But deep down I felt the gravitational pull of the diary, the truth I had barely glimpsed haunting me with the question, what did I really just uncover? Before we could take a breath, the front door burst open, and darkness flowed through, spilling into the light as if the shadows were more than they seemed. I could see them now, figures half-formed in the space between us and the light, faceless but desperate, pleading for release. Then, in an instant, the world swirled and flickered, the remnants of the dappled light dimmed under the oppressive tide, shadows raging against the walls, and I realized something was pulling us back. "Run!" I shouted again. But where to run? The trap was tightening, the whispers growing louder, clamoring for our minds. I was torn, caught in the duality of wanting to escape, yet feeling the weighted pull of the darkness, urging me forward to finish what I had begun. The next moment, everything began to collapse around me. I stumbled as panic tightened my throat, and the shadows surged, creeping ever closer. I wasn't sure if it was the growl or the realization that I was now standing at the precipice of disaster, but I had to choose. But the question lingered, what cost would it demand? As the shadows thickened and the weight of uncertainty bore down, I felt the night close in and I grasped onto Zach's hand, our hearts racing together in frantic unison, ready to face whatever lay ahead.